So, Star Wars is kind of in the mud, eh? Yeah, not a pretty situation. No one really gives a damn about it anymore. And that should be one of the biggest alarm bells for anybody that's a fan of any movies ever, given that it was the most popular IP for decades, on the biggest one on the planet for decades, and now no one cares about it in the slightest, and that's a big, big problem. So if you're new here, I'm Worko. Well, the long story is, I actually kind of really wanted to model this channel after one of my big YouTube heroes, Star Wars Theory. His stuff about, lore videos and, oh, what if this character did this, or this character did that, or what if the Acolyte, was actually well written and a good show? Oh, my word. Fanfiction-y stuff like that, that's absolutely my forte. I wanted to be a writer for these things. In fact, my childhood dream was to take over from George Lucas and write the whole of Star Wars. And that's what I was hoping to do with this channel, amongst some other funny things. But in terms of Star Wars, no one cares about that anymore. So I'm a bit at a sort of a loss about what to do about all of that. So instead, I'm I'm making this very raw video of my thoughts about the whole thing. Star Wars has been an important franchise to me since I was a little kid, since I was a bullied little 10-year-old, even before that. Me and my grandma went to see Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith in the theaters after I'd been bought episodes 1 and 2 on a VHS tape for my 5th birthday. And ever since then I've been hooked. And I was a lover of the prequels. Don't get me wrong, the original trilogy, wonderful movies. They give me the same sort of warm, fuzzy, homely feeling as the Goonies or Indiana Jones. But the prequels are what really solidified the whole franchise for me as this, incredible, diverse, boundless world of possibilities of storytelling, right? That I could get lost in, that I could immerse myself in and just get nothing but excited for what might come next and what could possibly go on. And that led me to the Knights of the Old Republic games, and oh boy, those games cemented Darth Revan as my favorite Star Wars character overall. I love that man, and I'm so disappointed at how his story ended in the Old Republic. No offense to that, it's a great MMO. However, how it ended, the storylines that kind of were left off unanswered in Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2, not such a big fan of. The Revan novel should have been called Lord Scourge. If you know, you know. But this whole world, this IP that was the biggest in the world for decades, has been reduced to nothing. It's been, in fact, reduced to, what, Disney Plus fodder? The fact that the biggest Disney film now, in terms of Star Wars that is being made, is effectively a condensed version of a knockoff season 4 of The Mandalorian that actually is the entire concept of its plot threads were all made up in a Disney boardroom to sell more plushie toys of Grogu, because Disney themselves, likely, in terms of what happened in Series 3 of that show, and also how Book of Boba Fett was kind of hijacked for 2 episodes by The Mandalorian and Grogu, that entire situation was clearly done via a hijacking by the Disney board, who said, no, you can't develop these characters, you can't do all this character development that was crucial in George Lucas Star Wars, no. How are we going to make any toys? You know what the safe bet is? We just keep the toys around that are selling. Haha! So you're not going to bother with any actual story development of the character of Grogu going off on their own to become the Jedi that, may actually re-spark a whole new version of the Jedi Order that actually accepts attachments and accepts loads of things that were taboo in the old Jedi Order that got them killed. And various plot threads along that. And then separately, you send Din Djarin, the Mandalorian, the titular Mandalorian, on a whole journey of being the reluctant ruler. Because that was clearly the storyline that was set out for him after he'd won the Darksaber at the end of Season 2. But no, instead, it's let's do the safe bet. Let's do the safe bet and bring Grogu back and reduce the entire summary of these two characters into just being, what, a kiddie version of Turner and Hooch? Like, what's the dynamic now? Are they just... I don't see where their story's even remotely going, because it's just more of the same, and which is great for Disney shareholders, because more of the same means safety, and that's risk-adverse investments. Oh yes, that's wonderful news to a boardroom of business people. However, a boardroom of business people did not build Star Wars up to what it is, and did not build Star Wars into the biggest franchise in the world for decades. No, that was the creativity and the vision of possibilities of different stories. Just look at the expanded universe. Yes, I mean, George Lucas didn't really consider any of it canon. It didn't mean that he tabooed it all and got rid of it all and said, no, actually, none of that should exist. He encouraged that. He loved fan films. He encouraged the creativity of the fandom. He encouraged bold new storytelling to be told. That's why the prequels were as they were. Divisive as they may have been at the time, that's exactly what he wanted. He wanted to push the franchise in new directions that actually did also make sense to the story, unlike the new directions that Rian Johnson, of Kathleen Kennedy's great admiration, wanted to do, which was push the story in a new direction, but didn't care how it actually impacted the story that came before. He just wanted to make a movie for him, and that was a long-running trend with those sequel movies. J.J. Abrams did not care about all of the fandom, and didn't want to make a new story. He wanted to make a retro movie. He wanted to make a nostalgia-baiting movie first, and then after that, he just wanted to, well, make whatever the hell The Rise of Skywalker was. Because, naturally, a lot of those decisions in that movie were, oh no, it's damage control, probably fed to him by the Disney executives, who seem to have a greater trust in J.J. Abrams than anyone else because of the amount of money that The Force Awakens made, really misreading the room about why that made so much money, about why it was that loads of new fans flocked to The Force Awakens and yet just dwindled after that. They didn't seem to want to accept the reality that people didn't go and see Solo because of the fact that it was out of protest of The Last Jedi. All of these different factors of this misreading of the room by the very people whose job it is to make sure they know exactly what it is people love about the franchise that they own. But yet, the spiral continued, and it continued even more. And now we're in a situation where internal politics is taking over everything. It doesn't matter what side of so who are you going to vote for in the next election you sit on. It's not that kind of politics that we're talking about here. It's not the kind of politics that we're talking about when you look at if you think that a woman should lead a Star Wars movie, when, honestly, if you're a well-written character, it doesn't matter what gender, race, sexuality, anything that you are, because if you're a well-written character, you're a well-written character that the audiences will like. That's why the audience liked them. That's why the audience, before Disney came along and bought Star Wars, there was never a racism issue. There was never a sexism issue in old Star Wars when George Lucas was in charge. But as soon as Disney come along, oh yeah, there's a massive problem with sexism. There's a massive problem with misogyny and racism and homophobia. That's such a colossal issue. Yes, because you, Disney, you made the issue. You made the issue, and then you supplied the solution that nobody wanted, which was to double down on very clear parodies of what are politics in a very centric bubble around Hollywood, not a bunch of themes that are thematic throughout the history of humankind. They weren't... The issues in Disney Star Wars are not looked at from this point of view. They weren't looked at from a stance of anthropology. No, they were looked at from a stance of virtue signaling, which is Disney's favorite thing to do, because if they actually cared about the issues that they were trying so hard to campaign for, they wouldn't have shrunk John Boyega in the posters for their movies, would they? In China, specifically. So why this double standard then exists, we don't know. Why they keep trying to peddle this, oh, we're holier than thou, we are Disney, we are the good guys, when the good guy move in this scenario, when you're holding Star Wars hostage, is just listen to what fans actually want. But instead, there's this tactic of hey, let's call them all racist because they don't like the sequel trilogy. Let's call them all woman haters because they don't like how Rey is written, even though they actually have no problem with Daisy Ridley or a female lead. The fandom had no problem with Princess Leia. No problem whatsoever. She was a strong, independent, very charismatic, very lovable, strong woman that the fan base loved. Why was that never an issue? You're saying you're telling fans that they're sexist pigs for not liking female-led productions or anything when it just isn't true. You look at the evidence, it isn't true at all. And yet, because of all of this politicking, rather than just focusing on, hey, we own the biggest brand in the world, let's make sure it stays the biggest brand in the world and actually deliver stories that, in fact, the fans of the biggest brand in the world actually like. I don't understand why it's that complicated to just go, hey, you know Boba Fett, how he's like the most brutal bounty hunter in the in the galaxy, and like one of the most feared, one of the most loved characters by a lot of the sector of the fans. What's the demographic? Oh, okay, so the youngest of that demographic will be in their 20s. Okay, let's just make John Wick, but make John Wick Boba Fett. And let's make Boba Fett feel betrayed by the entire, intergalactic commission, if you like, if you want to use the mafia terminology or whatever. And let's just make John Wick go and kill them all and become the top dog of the commission, of the intergalactic whatever. That's what fans would have wanted. Hey, you know what fans really love? They love Anakin Skywalker and his redemption. Okay, let's make Anakin Skywalker a huge part of shepherding the next main character of the Skywalker saga in the sequel trilogy. Because let's not sacrifice the entire story arc of Darth Vader coming good because he loved his son that much that it broke the sort of dark side spell that the Sith had over him, and he decided to sacrifice himself to save not just Luke, but everybody, by ending the Emperor's reign. Let's actually solidify that as a very crucial move by the Chosen One. And instead, hey, let's give Anakin the bit of a redemption arc after that. Let's make Anakin a sort of mentor figure in spirit, because, he's literally the Force ghost by the end of Return of the Jedi. Let's make Anakin some sort of spiritual mentor figure to the next main character, to, say like a wayward grandson of his or granddaughter or whoever. You make them actually redeem and help. Hey, let's make Anakin help Luke Skywalker actually establish a good Jedi Order and teach Luke Skywalker, who's now shepherding the next generation of Jedi, where the old Jedi went wrong, and just why it is that he turned to the dark side, and help Luke, therefore, teach his students to not make the same mistake. Let's actually give people, whoever you are, whatever race, religion, orientation, whatever you may be, the lesson that applies unilaterally to accept your own feelings and choose to do the right thing despite your darker impulses, to be a good person, no matter how strong the pull of the darkness is, because it sometimes is easier to give into hatred, to give into jealousy and spite and fear, but instead to actually embrace the love you have for your family, the love you have for people who are your friends, to embrace good feelings and reject the negative ones. That should have been the messaging of the whole sequel trilogy, really, if you think about it, especially in the times that we live in, when, since 2001, fear is all the Western world has ever known, particularly the Western world has ever known, and there's conflicts in the Middle East, there's conflicts all over the world again now, and fear is being spread like wildfire. Don't you think that it's the job of somebody like Star Wars to try and show people a better way? If Star Wars is for the kids, as George Lucas always said, then surely it's the moral responsibility of something like Star Wars to show people a better human way of doing things. Not what gender is superior, not what orientation is superior in their minds, but to show a better way of being a human being despite all of that, regardless of all of that. Because Star Wars, as was shown under the years of ownership from George Lucas, is for everybody. But the way that it's been run under Disney, apparently it isn't for everybody anymore. It's only for a select group that they deem worthy, rather than unilaterally everybody can find something that they relate to. And I really don't understand this trend now where characters have to look and sound and act. Well, no, I understand characters acting anyway. Where characters have to look and sound and be the same orientation as them, or be the same exact race as them, or talk the same way as them, for them to seemingly, apparently, in the minds of whoever Disney executive is making these decisions, that's the only way that you or me can ever relate to a character. I don't get it. Do they think that we're stupid? They clearly think we're stupid. They clearly don't think that we can look at someone who looks and walks and talks totally different to us and think, yeah, you know what? I relate to that character. I really relate to that character because I feel this way about my life, and they clearly feel a similar way about their life or something that's happened to them. And they don't seem to think that you or me or anyone can make that distinction and make that connection unless we look exactly like them. And I don't get this way of thinking. I don't understand how they clearly think we're that stupid. They might be that stupid in Hollywood circles. They might be that totally tone deaf that they don't understand the intelligence of their audience and living in this wonderful little Hollywood insulated bubble away from all the troubles of the rest of the world, where they think, yes, our virtue signaling is the best thing we can possibly do. And all of this that has soured the well. It's made videos about Star Wars lore. Nobody watches them anymore. Yet, yes, I understand there's a rise of AI slop, and it's so easy for people to just ask a prompt and say, hey, just tell me a story about XYZ to do with Star Wars, and it will generate that for you. That's easy. And yes, it was novel at first, but do we really want to keep listening to what is clearly AI slop, or do we actually want to get back to the integrity that is our own minds about what we imagine could happen if say Anakin didn't burn, or the story about what if Anakin survived the end of Return of the Jedi? Do we really want to listen to an AI slop computer generated version of that, or do we actually want to listen to somebody else's actual imagination that's well thought out and it isn't generated through very surface level logic found on any website publicly available? I don't think we do. I think we actually really value human creativity, but unfortunately, the Disney executives don't. There's a lot of companies that don't, in Hollywood particularly, because they've realized, hang on a minute, we might not have to pay people here. And if there's one thing that rich executives hate doing, it's fairly paying people. As we can see from the gender pay gaps over the last several decades, they don't like people that aren't them making money out of a product that lots of other people have contributed to. They want to be the fat cats that get everything. So naturally, they keep pushing AI-generated everything. How can we replace writers with AI? How can we replace actors to actually look like other characters through AI? I don't understand why they think this is a good idea, because then you lose the creative integrity of the people that you're trying to make a connection with on the screen. That's the whole point of storytelling, is to get people lost in their own imaginations, if you will. It's why books were ever a thing for telling stories. You don't read. Nobody reads Lord of the Rings or reads the Harry Potter novels and perfectly imagines the same image. There are people who looked at the TV show Game of Thrones and they thought, hang on a minute, no, Jon Snow, Eddard Stark, they don't look like that. The Lannister armor doesn't look like that. King's Landing doesn't look like that, because they've already imagined it in their own minds and they have their own image of these things. And yes, watching a film, it does kind of give an initial image of what to base things off in your own imagination of oh, you can imagine your own separate, like, clone legion or something in the Clone Wars and how they might have gone about things. But just giving you the same AI regenerated slop all the time, it stops that. It stops the human connection to anything. And I don't think I really want there to be, and I know you might agree with me, I don't really want there to be a Star Wars that nobody can connect with, because when a very small few can connect with them because, oh, gee, I look like that character. Oh my god. And that's the only connection you can make. And that's the only way that people can go, I relate to that character. That's when you're going to start to fail. And the fact that that Disney seemed very shocked by their very, very minute, finite targeting lens of storytelling decisions actually didn't generate the numbers of a mass audience, and instead generated the numbers of viewers that were that very fine little niche that they were aiming for. How is that shocking? How was it shocking to these Disney executives who've been around the block and been there for years? Oh my god, yeah, I know Kathy, I've known her years. I know Bob Iger, I go right back to ABC with that guy. Oh yeah, they're gonna make the big money. How are these people, who've apparently had decades and decades of experience, drawn this conclusion that, yes, let's go after this tiny little demographic and expect to get the applause and reception of billions of people saying, yes, this is the greatest thing ever since the extended editions of Lord of the Rings? How are these people actually drawing from A to B? I just don't understand. When you reduce it to a very objective, very simple business standpoint, when you say, yes, I want to take this very, very successful franchise and continue to let it be a very successful franchise. Why have you gone in to something that works, that has got a proven track record after 6 movies and a very successful TV show, The Clone Wars, and a plethora of very successful expanded universe materials and video games and everything else, and gone, oh yeah, you know what? We're going to scrap all that. We're going to scrap everything that worked and everything that was proven to make money, and we're going to change things. We're going to change all of these aspects that are very well respected and very well adhered to in the law to fit our own thing. We're going to totally change how everything works except for the 6 movies and that one Clone Wars TV show. Everything else is gone. Everything else that you loved and respected and knew about Star Wars, it's gone. It's out the window. It's in the dustbin. Why did they think that that would work? Why, as a sound business mind, would you go into something like that and say, yes, this is absolutely going to make us bucket loads of money, to say everything that worked is gone, and actually this new thing that is in fact unproven and untested, this is going to make so much more money. Yes, you know what? We're going to do everything we possibly can, because J.J. Abrams dislikes the prequels, to actually distance ourselves from those prequel movies. Even though there's entire generations, myself included, who love the prequels. We know they're not perfect. We know that the dialogue could have been improved, but they're Star Wars. They are the films that, to all of us who love the prequels, actually opened our entire mind to the whole world of Star Wars, to what could have happened before, to the era of the Old Republic, to, you know what? These were before my time. I've only seen the prequels, but what does it lead to? Oh my god, what could this lead to? And then it introduced us to the original trilogy. And then, oh my god, the ending is even more perfect when when George Lucas remastered the original trilogy, and they put Hayden Christensen as the Force Ghost of Anakin at the very end. It makes sense. And it's very, very ultra emotional, because then you actually see the person that you saw fall to the dark side and lose everything that he's ever loved in the prequel movies, right there, observing his son and daughter together at last, knowing and seeing his daughter's face, and seeing the eyes on his daughter's face of the woman that he loved most of all and would have wanted to die to protect. Seeing those eyes looking back at his son, at her twin brother, with the same love and joy that was on Padme's face. And you get to have that connect, and it makes sense. And it doesn't matter the dark deeds, the horrible dark deeds. He, in that moment of loving his son, was able to actually redeem himself to the point of being able to become a Force ghost. And I'm actually tearing up talking about it, because that's how much this means to me. This whole franchise means to me. And you can laugh at me all you want, Pablo Hidalgo, and whoever else wants to make jokes about fans crying about Luke Skywalker. Laugh at me all you want. But that's what this means to people. And you don't get that with Disney's Star Wars trilogy, the sequel trilogy. You get that with Andor because that's very well thought out and well written. And they struck gold with that one by hiring the correct writers. But unfortunately, this is where the whole sequel trilogy's fallen apart. The writing room was atrocious. Whoever was making these decisions, whether it was creative influence from the business people who know nothing about creativity at all or not, the writing for those movies was just abysmal. It was so subpar for what something of an entity like Disney should be employing that I have no idea what they were thinking even entertaining that. Why would you bring on someone like Rian Johnson, whose only project of any renown whatsoever was Looper, and even that was very divisive, very, very divisive, which, in your internal logic, you hired J.J. Abrams to distance yourself from the, what was at the time, divisive prequel movies, and yet you then hire a director to not only direct but also write the second movie in your sequel trilogy, which is following up from this immense hype, and you instead want to allow someone who takes great pleasure in dividing entire fan bases to do exactly that. Not to follow up in a cohesive, well thought out manner the story from the first film, but instead do the typical Hollywood logic thing of, hey, you know what? You know what's great? You know what's really long lasting? Shock value, in the moment dopamine hits. Oh my god, I totally didn't see Supreme Leader Snoke getting cut in half, which, yes, in the moment, in the movie theater, in the cinema, I was shocked. My actual initial reaction to The Last Jedi when I walked out of that thing was, I couldn't believe what I'd watched. It was incredible. And then, on the car ride home, you actually sit and think about it. You actually sit and think about the logic of what you've just witnessed, and you think, that didn't work. Hang on a minute. But why did they make Leia? Why did they make Leia Space Mary Poppins? Why did Kylo Ren go on this bit? That was very interesting, a very interesting arc, and I think I actually applauded the route that Kylo Ren was trying to do, is the denial, just let's let the past die. We're our own people. Yes, great, okay, amazing. That makes sense from his own personal point of view, because he's got to internally deal with the trauma of, hang on a minute, I've actually just slaughtered all of the people that I went through the Luke's Jedi Academy with. It's so much easier and darker to go, yes, we're just going to forget all about it. Just let it all die. Don't take accountability for any of it. Let the past die. That's understandable from a trauma processing point of view. However, Rey being messily hinted at with this J.J. Abrams mystery box to be someone important, and then, oh, no, actually, your parents were just drunkards that sold you for drinking money. It's not even remotely important who your family are, even though she's quite clearly gifted in some way because of the powers that she exhibited with no training whatsoever in the first of the sequel movies, which is just poor story writing, to be honest. All of that culminated together, it doesn't work. It really doesn't work. And then Luke Skywalker cutting himself off from the Force for all of the reasons you've seen Mark Hamill talk about in interviews, and being Jake Skywalker, it doesn't work. It spits on the very memory of everything that you've even seen in George Lucas' Star Wars. That's not why you're a Star Wars fan. That's not why people were fans of Star Wars. We were fans of Star Wars because of what George Lucas actually had written and had produced, and the Star Wars that we got in episodes 1 to 6, and also the Clone Wars. That's why we were Star Wars fans. We weren't Star Wars fans because one man decided, yeah, you know what, let's tear this fan base in half. Let's cause a civil war amongst fans. Some are going to absolutely loathe it. Some are going to think it's the best movie ever. That's exactly what this fan base that was already united and already just totally wanting the thing to succeed, that's what they all needed. That's what they all wanted, is to be divided and turn against one another and think and cause this factional war within the fan base, because that way they can offer a solution that's very, very risk-adverse and very, very spoon-fed, simple storytelling. Like, I applaud Rian Johnson for going so bold and trying something new. It's not something that J.J. Abrams wanted to do, and probably not something that the Disney executives wanted to do. Because how does risk of, they're taking it in a new direction, this isn't predictable for our shareholders in the stock market, no. I applaud Rian Johnson for going in that new storytelling direction. However, it didn't work because it wasn't loyal to the bold new storytelling that respected the previous story that had been told, like what George Lucas would have wanted. Yes, it was a beautifully made movie. It looked incredible, but the story sucked. And then all of the deleted scenes, if you actually look at the catalogue of deleted scenes, were so compelling and so interesting, even though it wasn't the Luke Skywalker that we would have wanted and loved and have even known from the original trilogy. They were still so good and so much more important to the moving of the plot and making it somehow make sense than the entire section of Canto Bight. But of course, if you cut out Canto Bight, you cut out Finn from the entire movie. And I really liked Finn, and the character assassination that he experienced in episode 8 was just criminal. And then, of course, because of all of that backlash, nobody watched Solo in the theaters and it bombed. And that film was actually really entertaining. I actually put that on par with Rogue One in terms of entertainment value and good Star Wars movie-age, you know? And nobody watched it, so an actual alright Star Wars project bombed, and so they never made it again, because clearly the shareholders know better than actually the reasons that fans, who are the ones that even make what they own relevant, they don't know better than the shareholders. No. They know nothing about how Star Wars works, and we're just going to spoon-feed them what actually seems to do numerically well, which apparently is more The Last Jedi, or is it? No, because you move on to episode 9, and then of course you get to ultimate spoon-feeding. Let's not make anything complicated, let's simplify everything, let's make this incredible 4-course fine dining experience of episodes 1 to 6, and let's instead give them baby food. Let's give them oatmeal with jam with a little dollop of honey. Oh, isn't this sweet and nice? We're going to spoon-feed them very simple character tropes and very simple plot devices and just, oh yes, MacGuffins and stupid storytelling of like, oh yes, the edge of a knife blade that perfectly matches up. An ancient knife, by the way, that perfectly matches up with all of the wreckage of the Death Star that's fallen into the planet. And, like, come on, man. And then the fact as well that the whole thing was revolving around somehow Palpatine returned. Oh, well, if somehow Palpatine returned, well, surely, if Palpatine returned, then Anakin can as well. Then the Chosen One, who killed him, should be able to return in some way, shape, or form. Instead of having Han Solo stood there on the wreckage of the Death Star, have Anakin stood there on the wreckage of the Death Star, being the one that turned Kylo Ren back to being Ben and showing him the error of his ways and why he actually had lost his way and he's still redeemable. That would have... Yes, sure, I mean, the original plan was Kylo Ren to do the opposite of Darth Vader and just go full dark, full bad, full dark side, full let's just be evil, ha ha ha, and succeed where Darth Vader failed by staying in the dark side. Ooh, okay, you're not going to do that. So instead, make it compelling, a return to the light. Rather than going, oh, you know what, I still didn't like the prequels, so we're only going to put prequel characters as a little voice at the end that makes no sense whatsoever. No. Instead, have Force Ghost Anakin show up and make Ben Solo again, and actually convince Kylo Ren to throw away his ways of being bad. And you know what? You don't even need to simplify it for general audiences when he cast his lightsaber into the ocean. Literally show us something cool with the Force. Show us the process that Ahsoka did off-screen in between the Clone Wars and Rebels, and actually show Kylo Ren healing himself. If you didn't already perceive him as turning good by the casting of the lightsaber, don't baby us. We're Star Wars fans. We're here to watch Star Wars. We want to see cool Force things. So show us a cool Force thing, and let us see Kylo Ren heal that bled lightsaber crystal that is in the lightsaber. And you know what? What would be super interesting is if, after healing the crystal, the blades had stabilized somewhat. You know? Let's have the cracks, the pain that crystal was going through by being on the dark side when it didn't want to be, and so it was tearing itself apart, causing the blade to be all jagged and all splintery and destabilized. Let's see Kylo Ren heal the crystal, and the crystal, because it's been healed and brought back to the light again, let's show the blade when he ignited it as, yes, being pure white, but also not being jagged and not being crooked and not making that painful screech as it came out of the hilt and not making that painful buzzing, and instead make it sound more pure and more serene and more like it feels at peace and like this is right. Because then you do, even though it's not been told very well, you do still get that hint of the best thing to do, regardless of who you are. It's never too late to redeem yourself, and it's never too late to turn away from the darkness and embrace being a good person and doing the right thing, because that's how you purify yourself. That's how you stabilize yourself, and you're not hurting anymore. Not like this kyber crystal. You feel whole again. And you're able to forgive you if you've committed things like killing your own father in the case of Han Solo. You're able to forgive yourself. Because forgiving yourself when you've done something bad to hurt somebody, forgiving yourself is the first step. Even when you're in a situation where maybe the person you hurt isn't in a position to actually give you any forgiveness anymore. Forgiving yourself is forgiving you on their behalf, you know? And I feel like that's the sort of lesson that George Lucas would have taught in his sequel trilogy, is that the first step to forgiveness is actually forgiving yourself, and then you can seek the forgiveness of other people. Then you're in a position to do that, because you're able to do the work on yourself to become a better person. And that's the sort of anthropological look at the characters that George Lucas would have taken, which I think is one of the special things that made general audiences love Star Wars movies, not just the cool blasters and the surface level stuff, you know? And I know this has been a long video, so I appreciate if you've made this far. It's just a big rant, a big, very raw rant from me about my despair at the state that it shouldn't have been brought to this point. We shouldn't have to, you know, people that want to tell stories. Storytelling is one of the most fundamental things about us being human, is how we share experiences and how we share feelings and how we share emotions. And escapism, particularly in my case, with the certain things that I've been through in my life, Star Wars is the escapism that greatly helped me through some of the worst times in my life. And yes, I'm getting emotional again. And the fact that Star Wars and other franchises as well out there, you may be a fan of another one that's been ruined by this weird surface level business money grubbing influence that doesn't put creativity first anymore. Star Wars being in the state that it's in is heartbreaking, because so many people around the world loved Star Wars, and what it's become now is a shell of itself. It's not the Star Wars that wants to help people anymore, that wants to inspire people. It's a Star Wars that wants to meet the bottom line for Disney shareholders and nothing more. And this has never been more evident in the fact that the search for Ben Solo was cancelled, the most interesting character created by Disney in Disney Star Wars in their movies, and shareholders rejected it in favour of what they think in their little bubble of being out of touch is the safe bet to get the numbers of Star Wars, which is Mandalorian and Grogu, which was ruined in the first place because of studio interference, because everyone loved the Season 2 Mandalorian finale, because the story of Grogu was done. It was finished. Unless they wanted to take it in the Luke Jedi Academy direction. But they didn't. They didn't. Because there was such a vocal backlash against the decisions made about Luke Skywalker and who he became after the original trilogy that they just scrapped Luke altogether. They put him in a cupboard. They never want you to talk about him because Mark Hamill was so outspoken about how he disagreed with the decisions by Rian Johnson and whatnot. He was put in a cupboard. He was shelved. He was stuffed away unless the Disney press tour machine needed him for, say, Jedi Survivor. Oh, look! Oh my god, it's Mark Hamill! Oh, look! Ooh, Star Wars! Ooh, Luke Skywalker! But when you wanted to tell compelling stories, Disney, you didn't wheel Luke Skywalker out then, even when it made sense for Luke Skywalker to be involved in something. No, instead, you want to give every single bit of crumb of story of Luke rebuilding the Jedi and making it better than it was before, and getting rid of the dogma, and getting rid of all of the things that drove the Jedi into falling. And you want to give all of that to Rey, that nobody actually seems to think has a shred of character depth other than she's, what, Disney shareholders' favourite? Maybe Kathy Kennedy really likes Daisy Ridley. No one understands why they want to do this with Rey. Because if they admit that Rey is not a well-written character, they admit they failed. And they don't seem to grasp the concept of, if they admit that they have failed and vow to do better and then actually deliver on doing better by listening to fan input, by not shunning and ostracizing actual Star Wars fans that are being outspoken about what they want to see in Star Wars, then maybe they'd actually have a win. Maybe actually admitting, yeah, we've actually really messed up. We've actually done really, really wrong decision-making the last X amount of years since The Last Jedi. And we want to do better by doing this, by actually not just nostalgia baiting people, by actually, if they are going to bring back legacy characters like Anakin, make it mean something, make it really ultra impactful to the long-term story of the franchise. Don't just say, hey, yeah, it's Anakin, remember Anakin? Remember that he used to mentor Ahsoka Tano? Remember that? Isn't this cool? Dangle the little nostalgia berries. Oh yes, come and eat the carrot. Come and eat the carrot, donkey. We don't want that. We don't want any of that crap. But these Disney shareholders don't get it. They think that we're stupid. They think we will just lap up whatever slop is fed to us. And I'm, for one, sick and tired of it. I don't know how you guys feel. If you feel the same, I know this has been a long-winded video, but put it in the comment section. How do you feel? Just taking out whatever you may think about who should lead a Star Wars movie. I'm not here for that. I don't give a shit if what race you are, what orientation you are. I just want to know why the hell it is that business people who are meant to be in charge of this great franchise and this very reputable studio are not making decisions that actually will make them money, which in terms of a business, their entire purpose is to make money. So why are they not making the decisions creatively, letting the people who know what they're doing actually do their jobs properly and deliver what fans want to see? It's so evident that there's been so many attempts at actually making something that fans want to see. Stuart Beattie's version of the Obi-Wan Kenobi show being one of them. Why was that not made? That would have printed money. Printed endless amounts of money. And they shelved it. And instead, revisited it way later to be Disney Plus fodder and gave it a lower budget than an unproven Acolyte show. If Disney's whole thing is to make sure that they support what might actually be trusted and true and tried and the safe bet, surely Obi-Wan Kenobi, one of the most recognizable faces in the entire franchise of Star Wars, a show about him is worth giving way more money than an unproven Acolyte show. What even were the qualifications of former Harvey Weinstein personal assistant, excuse me, compared to Stuart Beattie, a tried and true veteran writer of many successful projects? And yet, no. Instead, we're gonna just turf it off to an unknown. Because for what reason? Why are we giving this random show with no track record of anything a way higher budget than something that would print money? I don't understand the logic. Where is the logic? But this has been a rant. If you've agreed with things that I've said, hit the subscribe button. If you actually want to see what I've planned, which is so many different fan rewrites of things, it's fan fictions, it's lore videos about not just Star Wars, about like Fallout. I'm a big Fallout fan. I was going to write a load of interesting takes on lore videos about Fallout, about Half-Life, about imaginings of what could come next in the Game of Thrones saga, like how rewriting season 7 and 8 because they were a steaming pile of trash. All this sort of thing. If you want to see that, hit the subscribe button, ding dong the bell, and please keep coming back. And thank you for listening to my rant. I have been Worko, you have been the viewer, and if you want to like, share, subscribe, please do so. Anyway, yeah. See you later.